Bava, basra, daf kuf nun amar aleph. We're starting from 9 lines from the top where it says v'chol heicha. So anyway, yesterday we learned that if a Shchit Merav wrote all of his nechasim to somebody else, and he left over a little bit for himself, and then he recovers, it's a good matana because he left for himself to be able to survive. The Gemara says, how much does he have to leave for himself to survive? It says the Gemara kol shu. So the Gemara says, what is kol shu? Rabbi Yehuda Amarav says, kar, enough to last, and we had before upshot that means for a year, and Rabbi Yirmiyah learned even the merchandise metalton kedei panasase. In fact, the Gemara. So 1 minute. So Rabbi Zayda said, some mechavim given, some medai given lashon from the Mishnah. What are you talking about? Abayat gefek. What do you? I'm sorry, Rabbi Yirmiyah said gefek. What do you mean they were exact? When it says kolshu, it doesn't say kitei panasase. So it's very little. Where are you coming up with the kolshu that it means kitei panasase? Yeah. So for the Gemara, so it's sort of now the Gemara is asking chol heicha the tani kolshu lesli lishiyura. You're saying whenever it says kolshu, it has to be mamish very very little without a shear. Says the Gemara, look, but now we learned in the Mishnah. Rabbi Doisa ben Harkina saying that. Rabbi Doisa ben Harkina said, "Chamish shechelis hagoyzes manu manu ufras." It says there's a din by the mitzvah of reishis hageyes, the first shearing off the wall. You have to give to the kohanim from the tzigim. Yeah, hagoyzes at soynei. He's chayiv laseis lekoin. A chelik from the tzema was abgishon. He has to give a part of the wall that he cut off. How much is it? So he says the minimum has to be 5 sheep, and here he says how much from each sheep, the weight of 150 denarim from each sheep. That means if you times it by 5, you have 750. So the Gemara, chayav is b'reish sagez v'chacham mecham shechelis hageiz say kol shein, and the chacham say 5 the chelis geiz says kol shein. Doesn't have to be exactly 750, meaning 150 per rachel. He says, "V'amina mekama kol shein," even very little. He says. So they asked on the Rabbanim, "What do you mean kol shein?" Even very little. Amarav, so Rav explained, "Mano fras ubavat yehi mechumashes." He says the whole thing together has to be just 150, not 150 per rechelis. That means 30 per 30 lemashal, the weight of 30 dinarim per rachel. So you per tzigel, you times 5 times 30, you have 150. Not each one 150. So you see, kol shein has a share. Do you see the Tana uses the lashon kol shein, and even though we know there's a certain amount. So what's the shaila? So we could say so too over here. Even though the Tana learned kol shu, doesn't mean kol shu a pitching care. It can mean kitei panasase. It's literally abgefragt
for the year.
For the year, yeah. So you might have over the year, but the geish sages. But didn't who the listening. That's he shouldn't have learned kol shu even by the reish sages, the first sharing of the wall. I did the Kama Tanakama Shihura Rabba because the Tanakama to get Mazak Grace Shir. He says each one has to be 150. So he came and he said, "What's nothing almost?" He went to counteract it with extreme. So he went to the extreme to say very little, but that's why he used the lashon kol shu to show as the opposite of what he's saying. But in our Mishnah, where he talks about the Shchit Merav, that Shia kol shu, there was no reason to say kol shu. If there's a she, he should have said kitei panasase. So this that he said kol shu means should say kol shu. It doesn't have to be kitei panasase. Frag Yimar Pshita. I don't know if it's frag Yimar, but if it's Zak Yimar Pshita, it's Adava HaPashit. When a person uses the lashon metaltal planya, he says the metaltal of mine should go to that person. What is it referring to? Kol mani tashmish dekane. He's referring only to the kalim. Those kalim that you use for kalim, that goes to the nation. Except for the wheat and the barley, they're not kalim. And kol shekein behemoths avadim, they're not kalim. That's what the Rashbam says. Kol shekein avadim. Metaltally means kalim, and not wheat, not barley, not behemoths, not avadim, kalim. What's if he says now, not just metaltally, he says kol. He adds the word kol metaltal planya. He says all the metaltal of mine should go. That is afilu chiti v'sare. It means even the wheat and the barley. V'afilu the stone, the upper stone. There's a bottom stone that sits stationary, and then you have the top stone that turns. Even the grinding stone, the upper stone, he says it's also kana. He was makne to that person. Lavan may except for the bottom one. The bottom one is not made to use. It's not metaltally. It's hardly used. So the mother called the metaltla afilu rechaim tachtenu kani. And what's if he said and if he said called the metaltla, he uses the metaltail. So he doesn't plane. He says even the bottom one he's makne, even though it's unusual to do it because it's not made to move at all. The upper one is made to move.
Because the bottom is not like a metal to the
but it's still, it's not. The bottom one is not usually metal, but it's since he said kol metal, it's not considered as mechubel kaka, and then you are koinet. Okay, sagt die Gemara. Ich weiß, wo die Gemara fragt das Scheil. After kimekaka, oi kimetal nami. When Eved, if is an Eved considered as kaka, or it's like metalflin. Now we know for sure it has a din like kaka, but again to the kinyonim. When we use nachaltem, we use the pasik. So when it's nachaltem, so we have a hakish that has a din like a karka. But we're going to talk about it now. But bepel mamish, it's movable items. But the Torah is makish it to karka, so it has a din like karka. So which one is it? The son of Avavya said to Ravashi, Toshma, come in here, and I'll bring you a raya from the fourth Pedic. It says, if Eved has a din like Kaka or Kimitalte. So it says, we learned early on, somebody who says, I'm selling the city, and he doesn't say anything else. He doesn't say what's included. So then when we say he's selling the city, what was included? Machabatim, he sold the houses, Shichin, the narrow ditches, the caves. Shichin are narrow ditches where the water passes by, and it can go into fields. Narrow bayis. Umaris and caves, and mechatzois, and bathhouses, ubeis abadim, and olive press. Anything that's fixed, like ubeis hashlachim, and a field that has to come onto water, and it can't survive just on rainwater. A sada that can survive on water itself is called a sada beis habal. A sada beis hashlachim, it cannot survive on rainwater. It needs outside water from the irrigation, from the waters that are around. Avaloi es hametaltalin, but he's not kind of the metaltalin when he said he's selling the city stuff. But what's if he added more? But he said, I'm selling you the city. The city. So then, I feel even if he had behema or avadim, then they also is included. So I think you might is it echt if you're going to say that evidence is considered as metaltalin, is not bereisha. So because of that reason, it's not sold and it's not included in the reisha if it's metaltalin, right? When he sold the ear stam, so he didn't include Avid because Avid has a din as metaltalin from metaltalin, so it wasn't included. Only karka was included.
That's why it wasn't included.
That's why it wasn't. Then when he said he become ashveseicha, then he included metaltalin. But if you're going to say Avid has a din like karka, my line is down. Why wasn't it sold together with all the other houses? You said if he sells a city stam, he sold the houses, the fields, whatever karka, Mesabad, the olive presses on karka. So here, Avid is karka. Well, on mine, you have to say metaltal dummy has a din like metaltal, and that's why Avodim were not included. Yeah, you're saying Elamite metaltal dummy. I said it wrong a little bit. Elamite metaltal dummy. What are you going to say? It has a din like metaltalin because he should have included Avodim, but he said Amechas Abayis Tam. Says the Gemara, Maya Afilu. When he said he b'chol ma'ashavaseicha, right? So why does he say Afilu da Avodim? What's Afilu da Avodim? He b'chol ma'ashav. What's the chiddush Afilu avadim or anything that's metalton is
So
included.
it's included.
You said it. He komash v'seicha.
So it's extra.
What are you saying? Afilu ba'yavet elamai yislach l'meima. Rather, what do you have to say for this? He says shiny metalton the nayid metalton lo yayid. I would have been mechalik. I would have said only which he komash v'seicha. What is including? Only such metalton that cannot move on itself. Money, kesef, zav, things metalton, kalim, whatever. But it's something that can move, like Evid can move on its own, or behemoth that can move on its own. That's not included. So that's why he had to say afilu. Even such metalton that move on their own are included. Says the Gemara, afilu teima. If so, I could even say kimakaka. I could really touch up the Mishnah. Evid is like a karka. Why wasn't avodim included when he said amecha? Why didn't he include the avodim? Because shayna mekarka the night, mekarka the late night. I would have been mechalik. Which karka is included when he says he's selling the city? Those karka that cannot move. A house cannot move. A beis abad cannot move. Avodim, since even though they're considered karka, since they can move, they weren't included in the karka when he said amecha stam. So you have no raya. If it's evidence like kako or like or metalton. Amalei Ravinu Ravashi. Ravinu said to Ravashi, "I'll be patient from here. Tashma, I'll bring you a raya from the case of from the Mishnah in Peah. What does it say over there? A case of kol nechas la'abdei. Somebody writes all his nechasim goes to his eved. That means he gave to his eved a star in which it's written all his nechasim yotze ben chayim. So he goes free. Why? Because he's included in the nechasim. So we're going to prove it's kaka. Look, shia kaka kolshu. If he left a little bit of kaka from his matana, he says chutz mikaka kolshu lo yatsa ben chayim. The eved is not free. Why? Because we consider the kaka that he didn't give away the eved. So you see, eved is kaka. Rabbi Shimon says no. He's always ben chayim. Because the eved is not called karka. Only when will he not be considered ben chayrin? Till he says all my nechasim go to my eved, except 1/10,000. So when he says 1/10,000, so of all the possessions, eved is also part of the possessions. So that 1/10,000 he kept for himself. But if he would have said except for a little piece of karka, I won't say it goes on the eved according to Reb Shimon. Zog the Gemara of Amar Avdim Rav Yisrael Amar Rav Elazar As metalton shia eitz 11. Rav Dimi Ravina continues with his ayah. He brings a ayah from this Amira. What does Rav Dimi say? Rav Dimi Rav Yisrael said in the name of Rav Elazar they made metalton shia eitz 11. That if he left over karka kolshu, we said that's the eved he left over for himself. If he left over a little piece of karka, that's the eved. So too, if he left over metalton, we say that's the eved he left for himself, and he doesn't go lecheder. Metalton shia eitz ksuba, but by ksuba we didn't make metalton considered as leftover. Meaning, what was the story by the ksuba? Oh, he's going to explain. Why didn't they make metalton shia eitz ksuba? So the Gemara brings the story. My time, what's the reason for this chilik? Why by eved do we say if he left over metalton, that little metalton is the eved that he left for himself, and by ksuba we don't say that because after the metalton, eved is a davar metalton. Metalton have a shia, and metalton is considered as left over the other metalton. Since the other left over metalton, you could say he left over even the eved, which is also included in metalton. Ksubas Isha Mikako. Ksubas Isha, she collects from the kaka, right? From the karka. Metalton and Mikako, Layavashia. Metalton is not considered legabe karka as karka. So from Rav Nachman, you see, eved is considered linyan lashon b'nei adam kimetalton. So you could be patient from here that has a din like metalton. By the ksuba of the isha, if he would have left over metalton, right? So was she kinda the eved? No, the ksuba isha again. When he says by the ksuba isha, where's he bring that from? 25. In the Ha'ara of 1 and 2. We'll go back to the case of 1 and 2. What was the case? If a person was mechalik all his nechasim between his sons. You remember the case?
The what?
He took all his nechasim and he gave it between his sons.
Right.
And he gave his wife just a little piece of karka. So then she loses her schus to be able to give her any more of iksuba. She was Michael. She stood there, and they gave her a little piece. But that's only if you're talking about that he gave her karka. That's only if he left over a little bit karka. But if he left over metaltalin, so we don't say, oh, the metaltalin is going to be that's going to be for iksuba. We don't say that. Metaltalin is not connected with karka. We don't connect the metaltalin with karka. And her shtik is not considered as a mechila over her nechasim. So that's what he's saying. Ksuba sisha mikakau. Ksuba sisha, she collects from the karka. And metaltal lemekaka le'avashia. Metaltal legabe karka is not considered. Oh, he left her over metaltalin. That's her ksuba. We don't say that because she relied on karka for her ksuba. And if he left over metaltalin, we don't say she was Michael ksuba because her ksuba was only going to be collected from karka. So you see that it's not considered as Evan is not considered as karka.
What do you mean it could be metallic to the moon?
He's only metaltalin. We say like Rabbi said to Rav Nachman that us metaltalin Shia eats 11. That they made whatever is left over from the metaltalin. If he left over for himself metaltalin the odin, that means he left over himself the evet. If he left over any metaltalin, that means he left over the evet. But that's because we're talking about a whole bunch of metaltalin. So from one metaltalin, since he gave him a lot of metaltalin, he gave the evet. So since he gave a lot of metaltalin, he kept some metaltalin for himself. So metaltalin, legabe metaltalin, we say yeah.
So this was his evidence.
So he kept the evet for himself. But if you're dealing with two separate categories, karka, metaltalin, then we don't say if you leave over metaltalin, it has a din like karka, that it's like he left over karka and she cannot mun her ksuba. L'mashal, if the husband gave out the old nechasim of the karka to the sons, and he left over a little bit of metaltalin for the isha, we don't say, oh, she was meichel because she took the metaltalin. Because metaltalin on keg and karka is not considered as shiur, as if he left over. But by the evet, he gave him other metaltalin also. And he left over metaltalin for himself. So then we say he kept the evet. So Ravashi said to Avinam, I could say evet is karka, not metaltalin. Why did Abdimi say that if he left over a metaltalin, he left over the evet for himself? That's because of a different concept. We learn out that a get shichrur has to be similar to a get isha, and by a get isha has to be mamish karus legamri from the man. She cannot have any connection, any shaykhs. The shtar can cut completely, and there cannot be any connection in the shtar that keeps her attached to him. The same thing has to be by a get shichrur. But if he wrote a get shichur to the evet, and he says in the get shichur, but something in there is mine, so he's still connected. So it's not a get shichur, it's not a krisus. That's why we said that if he left over a little bit for himself, it's not going to be good. Not because he's considered as metaltalin or karka, because he kept a connection in the shtar and it wasn't a krisus. The different 5 neis matanes. Which it says that the din is not noig ad sheyichtavu kol nechseim. The din will not take place until he writes up all his nechasim.
It was over here. It was playing the nechasim.
He says, and if you want to start to take effect, or you want the matana to take effect, it's only till he gives away till he writes up all his nechasim. Which cases? We're going to go through each one in a second. Shchimera, Avdoi, his servant, Ishta, his wife, one of his kids, Mabrachas. We'll talk about Mabrachas in a minute. Shchimera, it's not. Shchimenat, like we learned in the Mishnah, in our Mishnah, Shchimenat shekasa kol nechas la'achedim. A Shchimenat that wrote all his nechasim to somebody else, and he recovered. V'shir karka kol shu, and he left a little bit karka for himself. Even though he recovered, matnasek hayemes, he doesn't get back to matana because he left for himself to survive. Lo yishir karka kol shu, but if he left nothing over for himself, ein matnasek hayemes, he could retract. If he recovered, he could take back his matana.
So it's just one day.
One din of that in order the matana to take place, and if he recovers to be able to take back everything, till he writes all his nechasim. Avdoi, it's not a case of kol nechas la'avdoi. He writes all his nechasim should go to his servant. Yatsa ben chayden. Then the Eved goes free. Shir kaka kolshu. But if he didn't write kol nechasa, he left over a decent care for himself.
He goes on the Eved.
That goes on the Eved. Yatsa ben chayden. It doesn't go free. So here also you learn only when is it going to take effect. The shtar only if he writes all the nechasim. Kol. Okay, Ishtay, his wife, somebody who writes all his nechasim to his wife, then lo yasa el apotrepa. Then she only became in charge of the will. That's all. Banov, his son, it's not that we learned the Mishnah. One who writes all his nechasim to his children, because Ishtay karka kolshu, and he wrote his wife a little bit of karka, ibdik subasa. She loses her whole ksuba.
Because she was quiet also.
Huh?
Because she didn't say anything.
Yeah, because she kept quiet. That means she was Michael. Because she took a little bit of karka and she shows. That's it. She's ready to get me her chelik from the ksuba.
She was not happy what she
She's ready to give away part of her chelik in the ksuba. Mavrachas. So what's mavrachas? So it's talking about a isha who's about to get married and she wants to. What do they write? They want to write a prenup, like. I don't want you to take my money. A prenup, they want to guarantee if a woman comes in, she's a wealthy woman, she doesn't want the husband to be able to take away her stuff. So today they have such a... So they write prenup before that this... A prenup.
Prenup. Prenuptial means before marriage.
Before marriage, that...
means marriage. So
before the marriage, she makes sure that he's not going to touch his nechasim.
And then everything goes to the husband.
She does. She wants to keep her wealth in a different bank account. He doesn't even touch it.
You have your own bank account.
Yeah. But he says it a little different here. In those days, they did the prenup differently. She came in with a lot of nechasim, so she wouldn't go into the marriage. What would she do? She would be mavriach. She would run away. How would she do it? Take all her properties and give it over to somebody else. No, he gave it to somebody to hold it for her. All her nechasim. And didn't write any t'noyim. And later on, when she gets divorced, or the husband, let's say she gets divorced, or she passes away, the kids get it.
But he doesn't get anything.
And the guy who was holding it cannot say anything. Because we shot up that there was no t'noyim. That there was no t'noyim was for sure that he should hold it during the marriage. She didn't want that the husband should be able to take away if she dies, or if she gets divorced, that he should be able to take a chelik from her nechasim. Okay? Here he says, a woman who has many nechasim. Smart, yeah, but he writes she wants to get rid. She wants to take her nechasim away from the Bible. She doesn't want he should have any merits after the marriage. So because of that, she said, I want to be makneh to somebody else. So the husband shouldn't be zeich in it. He writes a lishman but on the other hand, the money that she gave to the other guy to hold, she wants to be able to take it away from him just in case she becomes widowed or divorced. Oh, so that's what we're saying. Even if he gave it bestam and didn't make noyim with this guy who she gave it to, we say she could take it out, even though there was no noyim. Because we shots up as died to her mind She wasn't mevatel just to give it to somebody else. She had a plan here. Her plan was that if she gets divorced, so she becomes widowed, that she should be able to take it back. Okay. So what is it? It says the Gemara over there, right? She gave the chasm to another person, and now she wants if she became widowed or divorced, she had to write all her nechassim. If she wrote all her nechassim to that person, she automatically gets it back. Only if she wrote all her nechassim.
Had to write.
Right.
If she didn't write, the guy keeps it. If she didn't write, the guy keeps it.
No, if she wrote only part of it, then we think it's a matana. It's a regular matana. But if she wrote all of it, we know that it was for the purpose of that if she becomes widowed or divorced, that she should be able to take back her money. In every case, by metaltlin, even metaltlin is considered as shia, not just by karka. Levad miksuba, except by ksuba, from the case of ksuba, that there, only if he left over karka for the woman, if he wrote all his karka to his sons and left over a little bit karka for the woman, only then she was meichel de ksuba. But if he left over metaltalin, then it's not going to be considered as shia. Because the chacham masakin only benegay to karka. The ksuba benegay to karka of the baal. The chayv of the ksuba should only come from karka of the baal. Metaltalin loy tikin rabbanon. But by metaltalin the chacham masakin the inyan of ksuba. So since the baal gave all the nechasim hamishubadim for the ksuba, right, to the children, and she kept quiet, accepting a small piece. So there we look at it as her, this, as she kept quiet, she was Michael. That's only been a geya to karka, but not by metaltalin. The Gemara brings another ameda. Metaltalin, the ksuba, the metaltalin that are written, the finish in the ksuba, that it's part of the chayva ksuba. The isnu beinayu, and they are still in the rishus of the Baal, have a shear. That's considered as shear. That means if the Baal left over metaltlin between the division of the sons, he gave all the sons karka, right? So she was supposed to be zeicha in the ksuba of the metaltlin. So then it has a din like then it's shear. It's considered. She was meichel and she got her part of the ksuba.
But why was she meichel here about metaltalin?
Because that part of the ksuba was metaltalin. In the ksuba was written that it was metaltalin. Yeah. So this is another amida that comes in and says that by metaltalin there is. Ameima says metaltalin the ksiva b'ksuba. It's the metaltalin was part of the shibud between the money that had to go and part of the ksuba that had to be paid to the woman. And it's and it's there. And he gave her a little piece and said, "This is your ksuba, havishia." And she kept quiet. Then it's a mechila. If he said nechas leplanya, my nechas should go to that person. It says the Gemara avda iki nichse. When he says my nechas should go to that person, our evidence is included in nichse. Where do we see it? It's none. We learned in the Mishnah. It says akoisa kol nechas leavdei. Somebody who wrote all his possessions to his servant. He goes out free. How could he go out free? Because he is part of the nechasim. He's called the possessions. Our when he promised to give all his nechasim, karka is included. Where do we see karka is called nechasim? That's none that we learned in the Mishnah. Nechasim sheish lamachrayis nikne mekatzav mishtav chazaka. Nechasim that have achrayis. Why is it the best guarantee nechasim? Because even if it burns down, it's not burnt down. You could always take it the property. Even if it gets sold, you could always take the property. The property will always be there. So, but you call it nechasim sheish lam achrayis. That's karka. Glima, a shirt, a garment. Ikenix is also called. A beged is called nechasim. Where do we see that? That's none. Like we learned in the Hemshcha of that Mishnah, v'shein lahem achrayis. Nechasim that don't have achrayis, which is metaltlin. Ein niknen elav b'mashicha. The way to be kaina nechas rein lahem achrayis, you can only be kaina with mashicha. So you see, metaltlin are called movable items are called also nechasim. Zuzi iknichse. Money is called possessions. Where do we see that? It's not that we learned in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, V'shein lahem achrais, nickname in the Chos sheish lahem achrais because we have a chazaka. The Chosim, which don't have achrais, which is money, is acquired with the Chosim that do have achrais, with kesef, shtar, and chazaka. So that means metaltman could be kaina with nechasim sheish lahem with karka. Metaltman could be kaina with a kinyanaga with karka. Where do we see that? The story. Today's Alfei Zuzi. Papa had 12,000 zuz, and he gave it as a pekadim bevei chazai in a faraway place in Bei Chazai. So, but he didn't want to go there to pick up his money. Akninu nehale leRav Shmuel bar Abacha. He was makna his money to Rav Shmuel bar Abacha, so he should be able to go pick up the money because they wouldn't give him the money. Because if he was on a shliach, they say, we'll give you the money. If you lose the money on the way, our papa will come to us, fight the vidamo for the geld. Sign, you're the balabatim. So he made them the balabatim. He was marking to them the money. He made them the balabas. That's what the Rashbam says. Agav, asif the Veise. How was he marking the whole money? With the threshold of the door. The bottom of the door is from the shvel. So together with the shvel, he was marking the shvel. He was marking the money. He also, when Rav Shmuel came back bringing the money, nothing to pay. Our papa went towards him at Tabach, to a place Tabach, out of Simcha. He was so happy. He got back 12,000 dinars. That's a lot of money.
So he was a rich man anyway.
Yeah, but it's still a rich man wants more. That's my side. Yeah. Shtar Ike Nichse. Shtar is also called a Nechasim. Okay. And the Gemara will bring you. Let's see how much more we have. The Gemara brings like this: in the gates of studies, there are two different types of studies that are written on a field, and each one the halacha is different. By studies of karka, yeah. Omar, he said to two people, "Zechu b'asada zeh leploni." Make a kinyan here. Zai zeiche meinfeld fayena. The kisu lois hashtar, and also write him a star. Give him a star that he owns it. Choizer b'star. As long as he didn't give the star, the balasada could back out of the star and told him not to write the star. Don't give the star to the makabel. But But in the field, that he can't back out because he made a kinyan in the field fayenem. He was already Zech in the field. Just the star he can. No, we're talking about the star. Anything that's a schus. Zachem Adam Shlei B'Fonav. Amana shetichtelu loyes hashtar. If he told him, I want you to make a kinyan in the Sada for him, with the condition that you also write a star and give it to him. So Choyze, if he backed out before he wrote the star, so if he backed out of the star, so the schia and the karka was no schia because it's totally zebazeh. He says you only should be kind of the field for yenim with the star. But if you didn't give him the star, so bein b'star bein b'sad he can back out. There's another a third star. Today, the two that we just said, either a third star in Kodma Mecha, if the Mecha went ahead and wrote a star. And he sold his field to Reuben, said that he's Reuben, sold it to Shimon. So Shashtar booked him, but he could lose if he loses the star, and Shimon finds it, he could say it's mine. But he's masking because of the star. Kaisa Shashanil, like we learned. Kaisa Shtar Lamecha, you can write a star for the Mecha if he agrees. Even the Lekech is not with him. Since Lekech made a king in the Karka, and making away a star. He's kind of the star wherever it should be. And this is the halacha that we said that the star is niknu leikeyach when he makes a chazak in the karka. That it's shashaninu that we learn Masechta Kedushin. Chas shein lahem achrayis. He's kind of the star automatically because the Mecha said to write the star before he actually made a kinyan. And this is what we learned. The chas shein lahem achrayis nicknamed the chas sheyesh lahem achrayis because of the star chazaka. So from this we learned that even studies are included in the Chas V'Shem Achrayis because we said he made a kinyan in the karka. Once he makes a kinyan in the karka, he was kind of the star with it. So you see, shtaris, which is called nechas v'shein lachais, is niknim in nechas v'shein lachais. So you have a raya that shtaris are called a nichse, considered as possession.